Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Timothy Sly. This evening, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Isarava, which began on the 26th of August 1942. The village of Isarava, New Guinea, was the site of one of several desperate battles fought by Australian troops during their retreat along the Kokoda Trail. In late August 1942, Australian troops, supported by the United States, fought against the Japanese who were trying to capture Port Moresby. Heavy fighting ensued, but Australian troops had been overwhelmed by superior numbers, and on the 31st of August, they were forced to withdraw. It is estimated that 99 were killed and 111 wounded in the six-day battle. Today we remember those who died in the Battle of Isarava and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour, and the survivors who returned home. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge Vice Admiral William Mertz, United States Navy, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Operations, Plans and Strategy, N3 and N5, and the accompanying delegation. We also warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the reflection by visitors to the memorial. If able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If I please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. The idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record, which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal David Clifford Carland. David Carland was born on the 13th of December 1915, the son of John and Afemi Carland. The youngest child in a large family, David was born and grew up in Waterloo, a small town settled in the Victorian Gosh. His father died when he was 2 years old. His mother died when he was 10. After Carland finished his schooling, he completed a diploma of applied chemistry and moved to Fiji. There he worked as an assayer for Fiji mines, performing chemical tests to determine the purity of precious metals. Fiji mines was part of the mining boom in colonial Fiji in the late 1930s, during which gold production rose more than 100-fold. While he was in Fiji, Carland joined the Fiji Defence Force and served for a year. Returning to Australia, David Carland enlisted for service in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 20th of June 1941 at Royal Park in Melbourne. He began training and was posted to reinforcements 2nd 14th Battalion, and on the 1st of November 1941, Carland embarked at Sydney, bound for overseas service. He had been promoted to acting corporal and then acting sergeant while training, but reverted to private when he arrived in the Middle East in December. The 2nd 14th had been involved in the invasion of Syria and Lebanon. Its last major battle of the campaign took place around Damour in early July. Carland joined the battalion while it remained part of the garrison in Syria and Lebanon. Then, in early January 1942, the men returned to Australia. After changing ships in Bombay, Carland arrived at Adelaide in March. During the voyage, he was promoted to acting corporal, but was found absent without leave and reverted to private as punishment. In July, Carland briefly detached for duty to the 24th Brigade, but soon rejoined his unit as he prepared to head north to fight against Japanese forces in Papua. Carland and his comrades arrived at Port Moresby on the 13th of August 1942. Just 3 days later, on the Kokoda Trail, heading to confront the rapidly advancing Japanese. The 39th Battalion at the time was the only Australian unit confronting the Japanese and had withdrawn to the small town of Isurava 12 days earlier. Poorly equipped, the 39th had to dig in with bayonets, bully beef tins and helmets. The Japanese clashed with the 39th's forward outposts at Usurava, a sign that their next attack was developing. The same day, the first two companies of the 2nd 14th Battalion arrived to relieve the exhausted young soldiers of the 39th. The next afternoon, the 39th's left flank was heavily attacked. While the Japanese were able to penetrate one of the company positions, they were beaten off by two quick counterattacks. As the Japanese saw a weakness in the Australian defences, the rest of the 2nd 14th Battalion arrived and its commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Albert Key, assumed command of the area. Although the 39th Battalion had the chance to withdraw for a well-earned rest, its commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Honor, aware of the onslaught the 2nd 14th would face, decided it would remain in place. The men of the 39th, however, were moved into positions to the rear to allow the 2nd 14th to occupy the most threatened positions. The morning of the 29th of August brought ferocious attacks. When a company of the 2nd 14th fell back, Japanese soldiers poured through the gap. As night closed in, the Australian position was in danger of being overwhelmed, and a withdrawal of just over a kilometre was conducted to positions around the Usurava guest house. The Japanese followed close on the heels of the Australians, and in the following day brought no respite. Japanese forces attacked the Australians' rear, threatening to cut the track behind them. A further withdrawal was ordered in the afternoon, but many soldiers had to fight their way out. When the 2nd 14th mustered at Alola next morning, 172 personnel were missing, in addition to those known dead or wounded. Among the dead was David Carland. He was 26 years old. He and his comrades had been overwhelmed by superior numbers, which, poorly equipped and supported, they could never match. Although the 2nd 14th Battalion was experienced and relatively fresh, its ability to wrest the initiative from the Japanese was undermined by the torturous march of the Kokoda Trail. This meant that the battalion could only be employed in the piecemeal fashion in which it had arrived at Usurava. Carland was initially buried near where he fell. His remains were later reburied in Port Moresby's Bomana War Cemetery, where they lie under the inscription chosen by his grieving family. A wonderful son and brother, loved and ever remembered by all. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal David Clifford Carland, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.